All right, welcome everybody. We're so glad you're here. We're going to give it just about a minute to get things started,
Yep.
and we've got a fun presentation for you. I think you're going to enjoy yourselves today. People are starting to roll in. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to give it about 30 more seconds. We've got about, you can stay as little or as long as you want. There'll probably be between 30 and 45 minutes of content. We've got a question section down there. Um, really pleased with this audience today. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. So I'm Tom Bandy. I'm the founder of BandyWorks. My partner Mason is here with me. Latoya and Vanessa have been working closely with us, not just in the hiring realm, but with store management. We've just so enjoyed their experiences and what they're doing. We thought it was perfectly relevant today. So please feel free to ask questions along the way. We'll interject them. Mason's got a little bit of research, and then I'm sure he's going to do an introduction. So Mason, I'm turning it over to you. I'm here if I can help.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Yep. So, of course, we've got Vanessa and Latoya here with us today, store managers. Latoya, you're out in Washington. Where are you now?
Auburn, Washington.
Auburn, Washington. And Vanessa, where's your store located?
Groom, Texas, the Panhandle.
I love it. And so today we're talking about, of course, Gen Z. Um, both Vanessa and Latoya, you both have experience with Gen Z, also millennials, Gen X, boomers, the whole range of ages. But our focus today is kind of that new generation, newer to the workforce. And so I've like Tom mentioned, I've got a few broad um things about Gen Z. Deloitte did a great study. I recommend anybody who's interested in it to pull it up and kind of look through it. It's got a lot of different statistics. I'm going to give some broad overview on that, but then as we're going through, what we're all here for is really to hear from Vanessa and Latoya about y'all's experience, what's working, what you're actually seeing in the field, good and bad experiences, um, and we'll go from there. So just to get things started, this is the Deloitte survey I was referencing. They did a 2024. They do this every year, Gen Z and millennial survey. So you've kind of got both. You've got the Gen Z and then that next generation for comparison. And they do two things. There's a high level survey and a deep dive. So on mental health. So what are the top concerns for Gen Z? Cost of living, makes sense. Things have gotten a lot more expensive, especially in the past few years. Unemployment, climate change, mental health, but cost of living, money is a big one. Um, Also, having a sense of purpose in the job. Now, interestingly enough, that's not just Gen Z, of course. Millennials, lots of people want to have purpose in their job. It's important to them. Some of the big turnoffs that we found, rigid work, like a work-life balance, if it's not there, lack of upward mobility, opportunity, delayed gratification, kind of related to if there's alignment with what they're doing. Um, are they willing to delay gratification because kind of the juice is worth the squeeze? And then being ignored. Now, I think a lot of these, again, most people would say, well, yeah, that's not just Gen Z. I identify with that too. But then we start to get a little bit more specific. I thought this was interesting. Um, this chart on the right is of all the respondents that Deloitte pinged, 50% of Gen Zs said they rejected an assignment from their boss or a potential employer based on their personal ethics or beliefs. So they just, based on their own personal alignment, about half said, I've just outright rejected something, um, which is which is pretty amazing. So there's a lot more discretion by Gen Zs, even in the workplace. Um, you might feel that resistance, and I think we're starting to hear more and more stories of and feedback from people who are saying, yeah, they either didn't do it or something else, which I think is newer. So among Gen Zs, purpose is important. good for job satisfaction. There's a lot of purpose and wanting to make sure the values are aligned. I've got about 2 more here. Again, a broad overview, good work-life balance. So that's why people are staying. Work-life balance, learning and development opportunities, good salary. So salary was third on that list. Reasons people were leaving, the pay wasn't high enough. Well, I see those as kind of the same side of a different sides of the same coin. Work-life balance and the pay isn't high enough. You know, if the pay is good or it's good enough and you've got a good work-life balance, it might be worth staying. But if it's a bad balance and the pay is not good, you're probably not going to stay. So the pay wasn't high enough, lack of career opportunities, feeling burnt out. That was a little surprising. That was lower on the list than what I might have thought. I think in the C-store space and what we'll talk about in a couple minutes here, there is still a lot of feeling of burnout. I mean, I've heard from both, you know, Vanessa and Latoya when we were all talking prior to this meeting. I think both of you have had different stories of burnout, dealing with burnout, not just personal burnout, but burnout of your staff and kind of working through that. Mental health. When we talked about this one, Latoya, I thought you had something to say about mental health and Gen Z. You noticed. So mental health is actually getting better in Gen Z, but it's still kind of high, I think higher than what people might expect. So about 41% of the respondents said they feel anxious or stressed, just like on any given day, anxious and stressed. Almost half of the respondents felt that way. So current well-being compared to last year, it is getting better. That's the good news. It's getting better. It's trending in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think, Mason, one of the big things is how you deal with that anxiety. Everybody can have anxiety. It's just how you deal with it and channel it, and either let it fuel you or let it break you down.
Hmm. Well, I think the alignment's a big piece of that, because how you respond as the manager to the stress that employees might be feeling is a big piece of that, and that alignment thing. You know, we saw all these statistics on alignment. It's like, well, if y'all are coming in and saying, well, just deal with it, that may not be the best response. Now, sometimes we might have the urge and things are getting crazy just to say that, but I think taking that extra step, and in the next piece, there's some opportunities there about understanding and listening, that I think both of y'all are really, really great at. I don't know, Latoya, what do you think about that?
As far as being anxious, I feel that Gen Z right now, a bunch of them are anxious. Like, I have kids in their 20s and they all have anxiety. Every last one of them.
Mm,
And I think that a lot of them right now are taking medication for it. So maybe that's why it's better now,
could be.
because telling them to just deal with it, a lot of them don't know how to deal with it.
Mason, this is an area that I've talked to both Vanessa and Latoya a lot. I'd like to just do a follow-up here because this is
Yeah.
what I was the most impressed about. I remember you both telling me those situations where there was somebody, I mean, they just walk into your office. You never know when it's going to happen. And, you know, the doctor is in, right? What's the secret to connecting? I think that's what Mason needs, right? Well, how do you guys do that so well?
Well,
Vanessa, you
since
start.
of them
Oh,
like,
you start.
I think Latoya was talking, wasn't she?
no, you can go.
The only thing, and I wasn't saying that any of my employees telling them to deal with their anxiety. I'm just saying, as a personal thing, for me, everybody in the world has anxiety. It's how they deal with it. You know, do they seek medication? Do they seek doctors? Do they talk it through with their spouse or their coworkers or whatever it is? You know, when I'm in my office and someone comes on shift and they need to talk to me, I have to swallow and listen to see what they need to say, because You never know what's going to come out of their mouth. You might think something really crazy is going to come out, and then something really profound comes out. Like I just had a cashier text me this morning, and he works night shift. And we were talking about something that was going on in his life, and he texted me and he said, the Lord does take care of his own. And I was surprised to hear that. And he said, you recall our conversation yesterday, and I won't go into details, but he said that the appointments he has coming up, I actually had him scheduled off for. So I didn't know, he didn't know, but God has a plan, and it all worked out. And I thought it was beautiful. And I heard that from him this morning, and I was like, wow, this is awesome.
I'm sorry, Mason. I knew this was going to be an area I wanted to jump in. Let me just back off. I know Latoya's got something to add here.
No, please.
I just hear these
Go ahead.
stories all the time. I think they're the best part of
Yes.
what we do.
Absolutely.
When they come and talk to me about being anxious, since I have kids that are mostly their age, I just try to put on my mom hat and try to work through it, because most of the time they are kind of nervous to come to you and let you know that they have a problem. So I like to be able to be there for them, for my staff, and to let them know that they can come to me and talk to me about anything. I'm not going to judge them, but I do need to know what exactly is going on, because if I don't know, then I can't help.
Mason, I'm sorry. I just can't resist. I promise after this one, I'm going to let go. But you come in and you're tired, right? You didn't sleep last night. You've got an audit coming up. You've got to get everything ready. And how is it that people know when you're at your most stressed point, they need you the most? And how do you guys deal with that? Because it happens like half the time, right? What is the secret? Because I watch you guys all the time.
A bunch of coffee.
Yeah, we definitely all have our favorite beverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mine's Dr. Pepper, and I got to make sure it's full in the bibs.
Mason, I'm going to tell one more story. So I've learned from doing these workshops that whenever I have issues with my teenage sons, I just bring it to the workshop and always get good advice. So that we were in a cleaning session one time, and I had my son trying to wash the windows, and it was just like there were streaks everywhere. He said he was done, and he spent like 30 seconds on it. He was done, right? But the best advice I got was not to pounce and to be encouraging. And sure enough, I did it the next week, and I got some clean windows. It didn't follow up, so I don't know how they sustain it, but that's a different issue. So it seems like it's relevant. I'm gonna switch off, and I'm gonna go on mute so you guys can continue. But thank you for that. I know that my parenting got better because of the work you guys told me about Gen Z stuff.
Well, it's funny. We're all talking about super specific examples, but again, looking at the super broad 23,000 respondents, 44 countries, it's like, yeah, people want to be supported and they want to be recognized. And so we're talking about these really specific things, but it's all bared out in these super big statistics about, so I noted there right here, the quickest ROI or the biggest opportunity that could be, it seems like the simplest. Now, it's not always the simplest in practice, as described when you're feeling your most stressed out. You've got call outs, you're dealing with scheduling, there's a vendor issue, something else happened, yesterday that you're still dealing with. Okay, how do you pause for a minute and actually take the time to recognize the employee, or even despite all of your issues, understanding that they have an issue and actually hearing them for a minute. In practice, it's a little harder, but what it seems like the biggest opportunity, without having to do a bunch of extra stuff, is taking that moment and listening. And it's incredible how much of a difference it makes. All right, so last piece from the big data set that we were looking at. Again, just what we're talking about here. And Gen Z is kind of at the top of this list compared to millennials. So this might be the biggest gap between the different groups. Maybe it's more time in the workforce for millennials. Maybe it's just more experience, or maybe it's just the benefit of being around a little bit longer. Gen Z stress about raising work-related problems or issues. Now, I have heard some stories. I don't think everybody, that's true for everybody. I've heard no fear about raising certain stress issues from both Latoya and Vanessa, but there is some potential stress about raising issues or hearing it from your manager, concerns about micromanagement, or maybe a little unfairness in the workplace, feeling like some people have more experience, or even just frustration around how things work. Sometimes things have to work a certain way in the C-store, and there's no way around it. How do you overcome some of the frustration if they just happen to disagree? Even if maybe they might not necessarily be right because it has to go a certain way, but how do you still overcome that despite that? So I'll pause on this one a little bit. I don't know if any of this rings true recently for Latoya or Vanessa, for either one of y'all.
During our workshops that we've gone through as managers, talking about different things and different problems that we've gone through, I've come to see some of these comments from my employees. So I've split my time between first shift and second shift to see if it helps. It may help the crew, but what I've seen is I'm a doer, and if I'm doing the job and they're not, then there's an upset there, and it's making me more on the defense when it comes to sliding my time to benefit the team, when I'm seeing they're just going to let me do it anyways. Now, I have seen half my staff step up when I'm working with them when they weren't before, and I've been able to share ideas with them, but there's a lot of talk going on in the office, in the store, to see, what, their ideas and what makes it better. And for the most part, I take the ideas and run with them, but not everybody's idea will work for the team.
I agree with you. So when I split my time, they seem to work better, but I do also think that they do that because I'm there, as opposed to when I'm not there. So I'm like, do you guys do this when I'm not watching you, when I'm not looking at you, or are you just doing it because I'm here? Because I don't micromanage. I try not to micromanage them because this store is so small in here. So I try not to micromanage. But I'm also like you also. I'll just go do it. If I see it done, I'll go do it. And I have to stop doing that because I have to learn to delegate more. But that's just me. I'll just go do it.
That's definitely something I need to work on, because if I ask someone to do something, I don't expect them to do it in 2 hours. I expect to do it right then.
Exactly.
And if they don't decide to go get the cups and fill the sleeves, I'm going to go do it. It's an easy task. You don't need to put an hour's worth of thought into refilling cups.
This might be one of the trickiest questions about when do you let things break a little bit, and when do you make people do stuff knowing that they might do it wrong, or it's going to be delayed, or it's going to break, versus doing it yourself. So what's that let go point, and how do you decide what that is on any given day, about how you're going to either resist the urge to do it yourself or not do it yourself and potentially let something break or go wrong or sacrifice customer service because you know this thing is sitting that needs to happen. You know you need the employee to do it. They're not maybe doing it the way you want. Maybe that affects the customer. But how do you make that determination about when to do it yourself and when to let it go a little bit at risk of customer experience?
Depending on the scenario or the situation, I think sometimes I'll step back and let it happen and let the person who I asked to do it work on it and see how long it takes. And then sometimes I'm like, I'm going to take care of it this time.
Latoya, do you have one? I have a follow-up for both of you.
I'm so much like Vanessa, like, because I like stuff done a certain way, but I also know that everyone's not going to do it exactly how I want it. But at this point, as long as it gets done, I really can't say much about it. But if it's not done to my liking and they attempt to try and do it, I will show them again how it's supposed to be done, and then I'll let them try it again. But other than that, I go do it myself.
Hmm. Well, we've already got questions coming in. I see one raised hand. If you can put your questions in the Q&A or in the chat, we'll get them in here. This is one question that came in. It was actually, I had the same question. So when you do let things break, how do you follow up with some of the potential repercussions or making sure that the lesson actually stuck? So you know, you don't get stuck in this cycle where you just let it break and then, oh, you end up doing it yourself and it just happens all over again. How do you make sure that it actually sticks?
Repetition. But the thing is it's not even a matter of letting it break. Um, if trashes were done and they weren't up to my expertise, then just like Latoya said, we're going to show them how to do it the right way. And we're going to continue to show them how to do it the right way. And then we're going to step up and maybe do it the right way in front of them to see, I've got this too. You know, if the manager can do it and the manager's willing to do it, she expects you to do it too.
And then eventually they're going to get tired of hearing my mouth every day about the same thing over and over again. So eventually they're going to get it.
And other people see what's going on. So they want to make sure to not let the boss down. So they want to do it the right way. And if more people are doing the job the way the boss wants the job done, it's going to start a routine where everybody's going to do it the right way.
So repetition, follow up, and repetition again, and then pretty soon they'll just start doing it the way it needs to be done, is what I'm hearing. All right, so that was answered. Labor's tough. Okay, sorry, I'm thinking and I'm reading. Sorry, that probably looks weird for everybody watching. So how many times do you let people do it the wrong way? So maybe a little bit more on that. You know, given the labor situation, sometimes it's tough. So even if somebody's not doing something the right way, it's like, well, you have this pipeline of new employees, and where's that balance of, like, you don't necessarily want to lose somebody because the pain of having to rehire, find somebody new might way outweigh having to go do something yourself a few times. So how do you
I know in
how do
my
you balance that?
experience,
Yeah.
I know in my experience, if they're not willing to do it the right way, we're going to mix the shifts a little bit. We're going to shift, you know, maybe your schedule just a little bit, just to see if that helps. Just if they can see the other side of it. Because if they're seeing the other side of it, maybe you have them partnered up with the weaker crew, or maybe you have them partnered up with a stronger crew, go the other way. Because it does change your perspective on what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Because people tend to mold with the different people you work with. If you have someone that's working hard, you're going to start working hard. If you have someone that's laid back, you're going to start laying back. You know, everybody's in competition all the time. And
Yes,
whether you see it or not, I see it in my story.
Vanessa, that reminds me of that story where you had that really challenging situation, and when you dug in, you found out a very valuable piece of information, and you ended up just being able to shift somebody around and solve a problem for yourself and for them, right? It was amazing, you know, because some of the people you guys deal with are hurting, right? I mean, not everybody comes in and they've got their transportation figured out and they've got their healthcare figured out and they've got I mean, you guys have to fill in the gaps sometimes, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you manage
Mama
that
bear,
and run the
Papa
store? I
bear.
mean, you got a very complicated business, right? You have, you know, 5 to 12 employees. You've got hazardous materials. You've got all these violations. People can go to jail if they don't do their job right. I mean, it's intense. And you're dealing with, you know, frankly, sometimes some of the people that come to you don't have basic people skills, right?
Yeah, a bunch of them don't have basic people skills. But that's when your training comes into effect. So when I hire people, I let them know that you're going to be dealing with the public all day, every day. And most of them aren't people like me personally. I'm not a people person. I'm not a people person, but when I'm at work, you would not know that. You would not know that I'm not a people person. So, I mean, it can be learned.
So are you saying that it starts at the hiring process, or it's an onboarding process, or I mean,
It starts at the hiring process, I think, but it is something that you're going to keep constantly doing.
but Vanessa, you're going through a bump right now. You got to get people in the store. How are you going to be that careful when you hire?
You just have to take a deep breath and realize they need a job too. And I need people that are willing to work and do the job. It's not just a matter of having a paycheck. You know, my team here is my family. I have family outside of this work, but I treat everybody that I work with as family. Whether I agree on everything they decide to do outside of this job is different.
Sounds like my
Because
family.
just like Latoya, I'm not a people person. Okay. I'm a people watcher. People are
Ooh,
funny.
me too.
People are sweet and funny and weird. And like I just had a customer yesterday, and I watched the family come in, and there wasn't a pint of milk over at my coffee bar. But when they came in, after about 5 minutes, there was. And I was like, I went up to each one of them. I was like, hey, is this yours? Mm. Hey, is this yours? Mm. Hey, is this yours? And I was like, I got tired of asking. But what was weird about the whole scenario is there were 7 people in one car, and one person came up every time to buy it, whatever it was. So I know it was their milk. But did I go and look on the cameras? No. I just wrote it off and threw it away. But someone wanted milk. And then I was looking at my different dispensers to see, is there a reason why they were getting milk from the fridge and using it without paying for it? Well, my half and half was almost gone. So I refilled that, or refilled my French vanilla. And I was like, maybe that's why. They're like, well, you didn't have what I needed. So I took it from the fridge. But I think I got off topic. Sorry about that.
No, Mason, I just would no, I don't know that there is a topic. The question is, how do we deal with these problems? And you guys deal with it every day, and people just want to hear ideas. But Mason, it's a 30-minute warning. We got a few more minutes. You got a couple questions. I want to make sure the incentive reminds me of the hiring process and what you've got to get approved, because you only have so much in your control. How do you do that? And then I heard you say this piece about value. So from the hiring to the onboarding and keeping them there, just make sure we tie that all together. And we answer those last couple of questions.
Yeah,
please,
we talked a little bit about, hiring, and do you approach the interview process? This is maybe a two-part. Do you approach the interview process any differently with younger, maybe less experienced, new employees? And then do you incentivize them differently? So it's kind of two different questions.
I don't think the incentive would be different for the employees. Maybe the tasks that we assign the employees might be different based on how they perceive or how they see the job. When I do hire, it's the same set of questions I'll ask. Now, based on their answers, we might go a different direction with the next question.
How about you, Latoya?
Pretty much the same. I ask everyone the same thing during their interview process. And like I said, this is a small store, so it's 6 of us. So it's like a family, basically. And I just need someone who is gonna mesh well with the family and do your work. That's pretty much it.
One thing I want to point out, I hear family a lot when we're we're talking about working in these stores. Now, in some cases, Vanessa, there's literal family in the stores, um, people who actually related,
Yeah.
in the stores. Um, you might have multiple families working in the store. This happens a lot in small towns. Um, how do you deal with, well, you're working with family. I mean, how do you deal with that? We're keeping those boundaries in place about, hey, not getting in fights about work at home, or even the reverse, not taking family fights into the store. How do you kind of account for that? Because you've got multiple generations too. Sometimes you've got kids working with parents or grandparents. I mean, you've got a huge mix of that going on. How do you kind of set those different the tone and the boundaries and keep everything from getting crazy?
I like my team. I do. And there's always room for improvement when it comes to someone new coming in or the existing crew. But I mean, we just have to bring, this is the job. This is what we need to do. And out of everything, my kids, I have 3 kids and a husband that's amazing. And I expect more from my family than anybody else. So saying that, I have my son that works for me, and he works just on weekends because he works another job 40 hours a week, and he put in 60 hours last week. So I know I talked to Mason yesterday about my son and how I was a little bit disappointed, but at the same time I knew he had already put 60 hours in another place. And knowing that I wasn't here when he was working, I didn't know what kind of condition he was fighting with because we lost electricity in Groom, and the store is black. But I don't know how black is black when it comes to the store and lighting, because we had backup stuff. And his coworker was working on dishes in the dark. And the next day I talked to him and he was pretty proud of himself for doing the dishes in the dark. And I came and showed him a flashlight we have on the wall just in case for emergencies. And he's like, wow, that thing's bright. And I was like, yeah. But I was calm and I didn't address the day that didn't go the way I wanted it to go and didn't go the way they wanted it to go. But we worked through those different challenges. And I have 2 grandmas that work with their grandsons here. And one of them actually works really close and the other one doesn't see him at work. And, having family work with you can be hard, but I think can be, we expect more, you know, we want you to represent us as a family, and it's working out so far.
That's great.
I do not have that problem. We do not hire family.
I love it.
And I've never worked in a place that would be able to hire different family members. I mean, my daughter doesn't work for me, but on occasion, if someone calls in or someone quits at last notice, I know she can do trash for me outside. If I need to be able to run the store and I can have her come in and do a little extra work outside, then we'll compensate her for it. But she's not on our books. So, I mean, there's a little bend to it. And maybe I should have shared that. But
See, we have 7 different stores, so my daughter could work at a different store, but she just couldn't work at my store.
and that makes sense. I used to work at FedEx and I was a manager over all the package handlers, and we couldn't have spouses working with us unless we were on a low level job where they weren't over or under us, or whatever. So it's kind of
Yeah.
tipsy area.
Well, there's so many rural communities, especially in this industry, and there's an enormous amount of family-owned business. At the ownership level, there's a lot of family-owned business, and so it's a really interesting dynamic that I think a lot of people are dealing with, even down at the store level where there may not be ownership, but there's still a lot of families because, Groom isn't the biggest town in the world, and so you're somewhat limited on who um who might even be available to come in and work. So it's kind of dealing with what you got and then just making sure everything is still running the way it needs to, and certain boundaries don't get crossed in the work versus family environment.
And I really think our store is doing a good job because I've had a lot of previous employees that still visit our store and buy stuff. I mean, I saw 5 just yesterday, and they used to work for me. And they're fabulous people. It's just this job wasn't for them anymore.
That's great. All right, Tom, did you have some?
Well, I see Raj has had his hand up for a while, so I'm just going to promote him so he can just ask his question directly. And I think you covered most of the points you wanted to cover.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm just going to open it up now. So Raj or anybody else, just raise your hand if you want to talk.
Yeah, anybody has any questions, feedback, push them in. You can join the conversation if you'd like.
His hand's up, but he's muted.
So
So
Mason,
that
I think there is one more question while we're just waiting to see if Raj can join us. About different incentives, maybe. Have you tried different incentives for different generations? That's a hard one to answer, I would think.
Yeah, we
but
touched on that a little bit. Any other thoughts? I mean, so we do have a couple of the notes here. I mean, some of it's repetitive, but kid gloves, I've heard more than one person say. I mean, Latoya, you've said that a few times, and I've heard that from other managers. It's maybe not the incentive, but it's maybe just the approach to management. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think with Gen Z, you do have to put the kid them sometimes. You do, because these kids nowadays, they'll just walk out and they will not care because they can literally get another job within like a week or two.
Mm.
So, and like my daughter's 23 and I have a 20-year-old, and she quits her job every day. Like, and I have to
Mm.
talk her off of the ledge. I'm like, no, you have bills, you can't quit your job. I'm like, no, you cannot do that. So you do have to put the kid gloves on for them.
Mm.
You know, it's funny. I'm at the end of the boomers, and I remember when I was the Gen Z age, and they said the same thing about me that we say about these guys. I even read an article about 1895. They were talking about this younger generation. But you know, don't you always remember that special manager that was firm enough to let you know you couldn't do that, but was kind enough to not completely embarrass you through the situation? And is that what kid gloves are, where you save somebody's integrity, but you kind of set the boundary? That's the magic, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that what happens in the back office, or is that just what happens when do you have the chance to just talk to them in the store? Like, you know, in my world, I always had to go to a separate place, you know, but in your world, you have more of those opportunities, I guess, don't you? Or is, I don't know.
We usually go outside and talk.
go for a walk.
Yep.
That was always my favorite way to do it too. Some things never change, right? Well, Mason, I think we got about 2 more minutes. What do you want to cover before we close up?
Well, I'll open it one more time to anybody who's got questions. Throw them in there. I don't think our information's on here. If you have any follow-up, I can put our contact info at bandyworks.com if you have any questions or any follow-up pieces there. So the last thing is just really a summary. I mean, these were some of the feedback pieces that we heard when people were expressing their concerns about Gen Z. Reliability on the phone, asking for raises too soon or all the time in some cases. I think they talked about kid gloves. But then on the positive side too, you know, I think it's really easy to kind of dunk on the new generation, and maybe a little bit's warranted, but on the flip side, there's a lot of positives. You know, sometimes there is a good sense of urgency. I've heard when they're aligned and we've got the work um, lined up and it's well organized, you get some great, really hardworking employees that are young and hungry, and they want to work, they want to progress in their careers, they want to make a difference, and they'll take a lot of direction, and they're willing to listen, coachable. all those things. I think it really comes back to is that alignment there. And, that's why we had Latoya and Vanessa on here, because you've got two managers here who spend a lot of time on that alignment. Y'all are living in reality, but you also really focus on alignment, listening to staff, trying to foster that really good environment and try to promote as much opportunity to your staff as you can. And then the other takeaway was,
Mason, I got a question for you.
Oh, go ahead.
So, what kind of incentives are they saying we need to offer the different generations?
That's a good question. Well, if we have clarity from, I don't remember who asked it, but I think the question is like, are you finding that different people are motivated by different things? Money versus more flexibility, versus maybe an opportunity to be on a management track. What are some of the things that y'all are finding? Or have you noticed a difference between, somebody who's in their 50s versus somebody who's 22 and new to the industry?
Yeah, Mason, I have a lot of people that I work with that are, I never know quite if they're Gen Z or the end of the millennial batch, but I found it amazing because I heard all these rumors. There isn't Dealing with an emergency is so easy. I feel terrible. I mean, my generation seemed like, well, you got it. We used to have that sign. Your lack of planning does not constitute an emergency for me. We were just like such pain in the butts about it. But these guys love a good emergency. And some people, like you said, will come in and work an extra shift for some extra money. Just be explicit. But I think others just want that opportunity to be involved and be engaged and that being heard. I mean, it's amazing to me how much sometimes people will do extra because they get to learn something and they get to work with somebody else that's got a lot of experience. So, I guess it just comes down to listening. It's like what I've heard over and over again. Not everybody wants to be a manager. Some people, they need these hours because they got to take care of the children. Others need these hours because they're going to school. I mean, I guess I've always bootstrapped my company, so I love when both of these people on the thing have told me stories about how they adapt. Sometimes they have special needs people. Sometimes they have people that just need a break and they haven't gotten a break. So giving somebody a break can sometimes be a marvelous way to give an extra incentive. So I'm going to leave it there. Sorry to ramble so much, but I get so inspired when I listen to the store managers and how many lives have changed significantly because of what happens from store managers that give people a chance or really listen.
Does anybody want to answer that question about how to get younger employees to work the weekend shifts? Because I really don't think it's one of those. That's their job.
How does your son deal with that? What motivates your son? Because he's working his butt off.
Money.
Yep.
That was one of the
Money.
surprising things for me. People said that generation cares a lot about money. I was surprised to learn that. I thought that was my generation. Sorry.
He gets tired about having to put money in his car, but I talked to him and my husband are like, not everybody has money to put in their car when it breaks. You actually do. When I was growing up, you bought your own car, and if something broke, you either had the money to fix it or you drove it until it broke. He's got the money to fix his car.
I was spoiled, so my dad bought my car.
Oh, okay. Well, I was in a family of 6, and
It was
mom
3
and
of
dad
us.
saved money for everybody to have it when they got married, and then depending on the kid, they may get a car. But I was the first one out of the bunch to get married. So, but just like everybody takes their roles differently. Out of the 6 kids in my family, I was the first one to get married. I've been married for 25 years. I have 3 kids. They're all out of high school, and 2 are fixed. One is out of college, one's fixing to be out of college, and the other one's going into college. But it wasn't the same on my husband's side. It's him and his sister, and mom and dad helped where they could. And, growing up, we ate differently. A family of 8 ate a lot different than a family of 4. I didn't know how to cook. My husband's a fantastic cook. I suck. But learning from working at Garrison's, working with my deli manager, Lavonda, she's amazing. She's such a wonderful cook. And just by working here at the gas station, I've learned to cook better. And I know that's pretty weird to say, but that's what it is.
I know my son learned to cook at the Sheets down the street. Well, Mason, I'm gonna call time, so we get out of
Yep.
here. I put something in there, info@bandyworks.com. If you have follow-up questions, we'll get those out to Vanessa and Latoya. Latoya and Vanessa, I knew this would be a fun session. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and giving everybody some new ideas.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks everyone for joining.
Have a good week, everybody.